Yes, the VIP. Take me where I go, and I want to be. Yes, I'm smoking it, yoking it, yeah, it's all about me.
Obviously, Brew was not an operating system made for playing games. It was made for running cell phones, because of course it was. Even with a uniquely created chipset meant to drive gaming applications, the Zeebo still suffered from crippled performance issues, owing to Brew's background services eating into the system's memory and processing budgets. Hey, it turns out that running games in the Zeebo was like trying to run a PC game on a machine 5 years out of date with 100 Chrome tabs open. Not only that, Brew game development was way more difficult than the Zeebo team had expected, to the point where even getting a second controller to work was described as a, quote, Herculean challenge, given that Brew was basically a single-user operating system. But wait a minute, how the heck am I supposed to share the hottest games with my kid's sister?
Bye, Skittles, I love you.
The Zeebo team initially promised publishers that the system would be cheap and easy to develop for. But those big companies like Capcom and Activision would quickly discover the complexities and lengthy turnaround times actually required to put games in that box. And when things get lengthy and complex, that's when you gotta start throwing down the buku bucks. It's also when companies like Capcom and Activision start saying, why the hell are we throwing down the buku bucks at Zeebo games? As Stefano Arnhold, a chairman on Tech Toys board, would later confess, we thought that the cost to adapt the games to the platform would be low. But because of the hardware limitations, it was practically necessary to redo them from scratch, which generated a cost 20 times greater. And stop! Run that back! 20 times greater! Yeah! Ouch! Suddenly, I have way more respect for Prey Evil. And this explains why Sega games were completely absent from the Zeebo library. Though Crazy Taxi and Sonic Adventure were announced, and despite their long-running relationship with Tectoy, Brew was a bridge too far. Oh, and look at this. Wait, computer. Enhance. Yep, Street Fighter Alpha. Good enough for the Game Boy Color, just couldn't make it to the Zeebo. And now I have a whole new respect for Resident Evil 4 actually running on this thing. Once publishers realized what they were actually signing up for, they just as quickly began to dry up. Those big names like Electronic Arts, id, Namco, companies which had pledged themselves to supporting the Zeebo, were suddenly not interested in doing anything beyond their initial committed games. And what this ultimately forced was an intervention by Tectoy, who formed the Tectoy Digital Division in order to furnish the system with first-party titles and slowly bolster its library over time. This will ultimately lead to some of the Zeebo's best games and few exclusives, like the Zeebo Extreme and Zeebo Sports games. And the fact that I call these the best is not necessarily a compliment. By the measure of Andre Penna, who served as a game producer and coordinator for the fledgling system, we managed to develop half a dozen games, but at a great cost. That might be the most dramatic quote I've ever read on the channel. So internally, things were grim. But launching a system is hard. What else is new? On the PR side of things, the months leading up to the new June 2009 release saw interest and optimism from the press. The Zeebo was still an amazing pitch, and publications praised the upcoming system as a solution to the bootleg market, a step forward for wireless multimedia, and as a potential upsetter on the ongoing console war. Zeebo has an official YouTube channel, and as of producing this video, all the original trailers and videos are still up, and so are the comments. So if you want to, you can go and see in real time what the reactions were. I mean, it's still a YouTube comment section, so it's a lot of skepticism, some outright hostility, but there was anticipation for the Zeebo. It seemed like a long shot, but maybe they could pull this off? And what was this shining beacon of progress going to cost? All this for a tidy 4.99 reais. And 4.99 reais in Brazil at the time was roughly 250 bucks US. And in the grand scheme of things, I know that sounds like peanuts. Like, an Xbox 360 was $1,000 USD, 4 times the price back in America. And the games were cheap too. In comparison, Zeebo games were around 10 bucks US versus upwards to $120 US for a 360 disc. But there was just one problem, and it was that price. 4.99 reais. Now, absolutely, it killed consoles like the 360. But as a console for But the people? $4.99 was a horrible price point. The minimum wage in Brazil at the time came out to about 465 reais a month, roughly 3 reais an hour, which meant that the Zeebo, which again was targeting the large casual market and middle-class families, would wind up costing more than a full month's salary. And $10 a game? That might be reasonable for a console game, but these were not console games. These were ports of cell phone ports, severely downgraded games, or old arcade games, or flash games. And of course, the kind of people who could easily afford the Zeebo didn't need a weird cell phone home version of Resident Evil 4 because they could just go play the real thing on a PS2. The angle was there, but this price point was not exactly the way to start a console gaming revolution. What's more surprising was the fact that Zeebo Inc. knew it was too high. They actually wanted to sell the Zeebo at $2.99 reais, roughly $130 US, which was still expensive, but at least competitively priced to Mega Drive and Master System plug-and-plays. This would lead to one of the craziest stories I have ever heard of the console gaming biz. Zeebo announced a planned price drop well in advance of the console launch. They basically said, yo, we got this awesome new product. Do not buy it yet. Like, this is business 101 stuff, right? But these guys were amateurs. What the hell was going on at headquarters? The truth was, Zeebo Inc. had made a deal with the devil and their hands were unfortunately tied up by their largest investor and most essential partner in production, Qualcomm. Qualcomm reportedly refused to budge when it came to subsidizing the price of the system's chipset. This meant they weren't willing to put in any more money towards production and manufacturing. And now true, Qualcomm only threw down $10 million. That wasn't a whole lot to begin with. Why didn't Tectoy just find a new partner? That's just how broke they were. Remember, the Zeebo was just one way they were trying to crawl out of their post-Sega debt. I still don't understand why the price drops were made public, but the Zeebo had no choice but to launch the system at a price point that they knew would never work. But Zeebo Inc. still tried to sweeten the pot. Each system came with 3 games pre-installed: Brain Challenge, FIFA 09, and Need for Speed Carbon. And if none of those struck your fancy, you'd be entitled to a free download for one of these system's other 7 launch titles, including Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart, Quake 1 and 2, and Double Dragon. Now, Nitro Kart needs its own video because, dude, what the But then hold the damn phone. Cell phone Quake 1 and 2? These gotta be just straight garbo like Prey Evil, right? Actually, I'm here to say that these are both really solid ports. There's of course no deathmatch. Brew! But up until the recent re-releases, this was probably the best console port of Quake. And this version of Double Dragon is actually a Zeebo exclusive remake. Okay, yes, Quake and Double Dragon weren't exactly hot IPs in the late 2000s, but this was a country where the Master System and Mega Drive still ruled. It was a weird spread of games that ran the gamut in both genres and generations, but I think it was actually a pretty smart move to establish the Zeebo as a serious contender. If nothing else, it's what drew me to the system in the first place. Sure, they could not stack up to the modern games, but they were at least more modern than Mortal Kombat 3 on the Master System or Duke Nukem 3D on the Mega Drive. All that was left was to see how the public responded come June 2009 when the Zeebo finally hit Brazilian shelves. And here it is, the system itself. First of all, I gotta say, I love the look of this thing, man. I like how everything in Brazil has got curves, right? That Brazilian butt lifts, Honda Queijo, and now the Zeebo. The first thing you'll notice though when you really get your hands on it is how insanely light it is. I guess all that fancy cell phone tech is really not a whole lot in here. In fact, it weighs about as much as 7 Honda Queijo. And also, how did my celiac ass only just find out about these cheesy gluten-free balls of heaven? They're amazing. If you've got a Brazilian joint in your area, get on it. They're crazy good.
This has been a Stop Skeletons public service announcement.
The system has an SD card slot, 2 USB ports up front, 1 in back, and composite out. The logo lights up when it's on. There's even a cool blue light that runs around the front. I think it's a really striking look. This is the controller that shipped with the system. It is barely legally distinct from a Wii Classic controller. The biggest differences are that the Zeebo controller only has 2 shoulder buttons and, understandably, isn't as nice, with a hollow overall feel, really squishy D-pad, and analog sticks that are both cheap feeling and too close together. My thumbs tend to slam into each other when I'm playing 3D games like Quake or Prey. I was pretty unimpressed, and I don't think I was alone because Zeebo Inc. eventually released a controller revision that attempted to fix some of these issues. But there was also this motion-controlled boomerang controller because it ain't a console in 2009 unless it's trying to be the Wii. I'll give them credit though, they were ahead of the Kinect and the PlayStation Move. For those that care, here are the Zeebo's actual specs, which were underpowered even compared to some cell phones at the time. The software itself is certainly giving it its all, with charming animated sliding icons for each game. Gotta love this awkward animation of Leon just standing there with his gun. Its software really went all out with spinning Quake logos. I mean, it's a cool logo, but geez, way to do the bare minimum, guys. And here we have some Pac-Man ghosts trapped in an unending hellish punishment. But the gold medal definitely goes to FIFA 09, which is just a lone ball dribbling itself. This is one of the saddest things I've ever seen. The music that plays is upbeat and fun, though it has all the flair of a work safety orientation DVD. Games load in about 20 to 30 seconds, which is not bad. However, some can take around 90 seconds, like Bejeweled here. For these games, an extra screen pops up to let you know, hey, this is gonna take a little longer. Yeah, it's gonna take a little longer to load up Bejeweled. You know, while you're waiting, you can kill some time on your phone. Maybe play some Bejeweled. I have 58 different software titles on this Zeebo, which is basically every game that was ever released. And no, these were not all purchased as far as I know. While Zeebo PC emulation is nearly non-existent, at least right now, it is possible to put Zeebo ROMs on your Zeebo, which means, you guessed it, piracy! Man, they tried so hard to protect this thing from piracy, but the market finds a way. The Zevo launched to modest press coverage, certainly nothing approaching the level of the big three consoles, not even as much attention as the N-Gage before it or the Ouya that would follow years later. And I mentioned those two in particular because they're some of the closest points of comparison to the Zevo in terms of positioning, intended demographics, and frankly, hardware specs. It's here where I really need to drive home that the Zevo was, for all intents and purposes, a souped-up cell phone pretending to be an overpriced home console. The first opportunity they had to reduce the price came in September 2009, 3 months out from launch, which sounds like a record, but may I remind you that the N-Gage had a $100 price drop in just 2 weeks. Here they brought the MSRP down to $399 reais, which seemed to represent a fairly significant drop. But it wouldn't even be another 2 months before they were able to further lower the price to the original goal of $299, going into effect just in November. And again, what is crazy about all of this, they had warned consumers that this would be the plan from the beginning, as early as March. I didn't go to business school, but I'm pretty sure that's a really bad look. Dropping the price this way made them look desperate, and then announcing the price drops so early on, well, scared away the early adopters. It's like a two-pronged attack of shooting yourself in the foot. Except, this wasn't a decision left up to the Zevo team. Nope, this was, as we said before, a mandate from Qualcomm. What became apparent to all involved was that Qualcomm was sandbagging the Zevo, in spite of them standing the most to potentially gain from it. Turns out that Qualcomm was never particularly interested in the video game market. Again, in spite of their not insignificant financial stake in it. In fact, as Stefano Arnhold would put it bluntly, Qualcomm didn't want to start a video game company. So then why invest? Why put in all this money? Why do any of this? Andre Pinat had his theory. Qualcomm was open to dialogue to the point of generating some hope for a change in the chip and operating system architecture, but it became increasingly clear that nothing was going to change. Ronaldo Normand would further elaborate, Zevo was trying to create an ecosystem, not sell chipsets, which is what Qualcomm wanted, to spread brew through the market. So in other words, Qualcomm saw the Zevo as good for one thing and one thing only, selling those sweet, sweet chipsets, and to demonstrate the viability of Brew as a software platform, which is hilarious given how Brew killed off developer interest in the console. Brew never quite caught on in the ways Qualcomm had hoped, not with Android and iOS on the horizon, and a major shift in the global mobile market due. And so beyond their initial investments and continued chip manufacture, they weren't really a part of the console's picture past a certain point. They'd sold their chips, and then Qualcomm was like, alright, we're done now, why are you still here? So Zevo was basically left to fend for itself and try and carve out a new niche in a market that was quickly moving past them. Oh, and they had to do this with practically no money left in their coffers and practically no install base. Normand spoke bluntly on the state of the business. We were positioned as a competitor to the PlayStation 2, only less powerful and with fewer games. It was a mistake. There was never a profit with the console. There has always been loss. And welcome to the new most dramatic quote I've ever read on the channel. And also, yeah, you heard that right. The Zevo's biggest competitor in Brazil in the year 2009 was the PS2. It had officially launched in Brazil in late 2009 at $799, and that import price proposition was still beating the pants off of the poor Zevo. The PS2 claims another victim. And of course, that is not the whole picture. Gray market PS2 prices would have been substantially lower by this point, cheaper than the retail price of the Zevo. And not only that, but it was common for gray market PS2s to come pre-installed with mod chips that allowed consumers to play bootleg games, or even watch Netflix. Don't forget that Netflix first came to consoles in Brazil on the PS2. This wasn't just proof that the Zevo was battling against a more powerful and accessible console, it was testimony to the fact that the Zevo's core business model was woefully out of touch with their target market. Brazilian gamers are incredibly savvy. They tend to know their stuff. Folks who wanted to get their hands on video games already had plenty of means at their disposal, and for way less than $4.99. Zevo thought they were the answer to Brazil's console problem, but they forgot that Brazilians have been solving that problem for themselves since, well, even before the Odyssey 2. For both the disposable income crowd who could afford the legit hardware, or the more financially savvy crowd who could stretch a buck in the gray market, Zevo was not the answer. Which meant it was time for a course correct. Down but not out. Zevo did the price drop 3 months out from launch, and another month after that, they released in Mexico for 2,499 pesos, complete with a complete new brand vibe. That's right. Zevo did a pivot into edutainment, baby. If they couldn't win the war with entertainment, they'll secure the education market. Or at least that was the attempt. But this was a whole new Zevo, with a new model complete with an updated controller called the Dragon, a computer keyboard, and the ability to surf the web. It was an impressive rebrand, given how things are going back in Brazil at the time. However, because of how things are going back in Brazil at the time, they didn't really have the funds to live up to this edutainment angle. With this new angle came fresh revenue streams. You had to purchase Z credits by the hour to access their limited child-safe version of the internet. You gotta remember that the Zevo as a system was locked down like Fort Knox. Charging by the hour wasn't a slam dunk though, because time would only tick while the Zevo was actively downloading web pages, meaning that the hours you were buying could potentially be stretched to days or weeks. Great deal for consumers, but yet another good on paper, bad in execution idea from the minds at Zevo. This last grasp of an edutainment rebrand eventually made its way back to Brazil the following year in September 2010, where the revised model released at the then standard $299 price point. Owners of the original model got a free update to the new OS, and Zevo Inc. even shipped them the keyboard and the updated controller for free. This new controller, again that they called the Dragon, resembled a more conventional dual analog controller, of course with some trademark Brazilian curves. While I can't speak to the quality of the Dragon, it wouldn't take much to be better than this thing. And as someone who spent way too many hours playing the Zevo, I wouldn't call the edutainment games a huge get for the system, but I respect the hell out of the moxie. Because I mean, the child-friendly education/budget PC angle was clearly a desperate move from Zevo Inc. But it was the best they had as they started making their planned moves into China and India towards the beginning of 2010, which they still attempted even after their dreams of Brazilian domination burned down faster than the Amazon rainforest during a farmland dispute. But hey, Asia was one of the few places in the world where the N-Gage was successful. And as India and China began to expand wireless coverage, the Zevo sort of made sense as a starter computer. And at the same time, Zevo was still hoping that the console's gaming capabilities would attract the gamers who were presumably still being ignored by major game companies. And if all this sounds like Zevo were beginning to stretch themselves too thin and neglect their interests back in Brazil, That's because they were. In 2010, the system's games library reached serious stagnation. With major publishers long gone and Tectoy no longer developing games, new software was a trickle. To give you an idea how bad it was, over a third of all 2010 Zevo releases were Data East arcade games. Bad Dudes, Karnov, Burger Time, none of which, by the way, were localized into Portuguese. It's bizarre. So it was time for one last desperate flail. Zevo Inc. formed a new studio called Zevo Interactive, which blatantly chased after the Wii. But in 2010, that's a little late to the party, but soon we got titles like Zeboids, which let you make a pretty decent version of a me. Check out our radical buddy over here, Zebro. What's up, Zebro? Of course, all this came too little too late. With the company spreading itself so thin across multiple markets and further developing their educational angle, console owners in Brazil and Mexico were left largely neglected, and support for the Zevo continued to dwindle. Between September and December 2010, only 10 games were released. On December 22nd, 2010, Zevo Interactive Studios dropped Zevo FC Super League! Unbeknownst to any Zevo superfans out there, if there were any, this would be the system's final piece of software, putting the Zevo's total library at just 58 games. On May 27th, 2011, after 5 months of complete inactivity, news finally broke to its meager Brazilian and Mexican audiences. Zevo was ending operations come September 2011. At which point, by the way, the system went for nearly 10 months without any new software releases. With the announcement also came reduced prices on games for the months to follow. Oh, and as well as this, come September, games would no longer be available for purchase, and the system's online components would be rendered unusable. So anyone still rocking the Zevo had 4 months to scoop up whatever they could, because after that, they were completely pulling the plug. And again, this was also the end of internet functionality, so that budget computer angle that Zevo was so excited about, also gone. Despite a valiant effort and against incredible odds, the Zevo's lifespan clocked a little over 2 years in Brazil and just over a year and a half in Mexico. And yet, despite failing to gain any significant traction, the company went forward with bringing the platform to India and China, which, like, you just gotta admire their unshakable optimism. Now, release dates are sketchy, but we think this final iteration of the Zevo made its way to Asia at some point towards the end of 2011, around the time they were packing it in back west. Needless to say, Zevo was not met particularly warmly, and they sputtered out just as quickly as they had back on the other side of the Pacific. And so Zevo Inc. limped into 2012 with one last desperate gasp. Plans to release a next-generation Android-based platform for launch that same year. It's a move that the company had wanted to make much earlier, but which they hadn't been able to because, again, Qualcomm. But in this case, late was not better than never, as nothing ever materialized from this late game move to Android. All that remains as a testament to the Zevo's legacy are the consoles themselves, unable to download any further games than whatever may come already installed on them, and sold for exorbitant prices on the aftermarket considering their complete lack of functionality. You know, it's kind of ironic. Nowadays, the only way to play the Zevo's game library is to obtain a console from a gray market seller that has games already downloaded onto it, or ROMs backdoor installed. We once again need to give a shout out to Rockman KB for letting us their fully stocked Zevo. Way back at the start of the Zevo, way back in 2007, the original business plan was to create a product, explore a niche that we estimated in 800 million families that would solve the gaming problem in Brazil. But it turns out that Brazilians have been solving that problem for themselves for decades, and the Zevo was instead defeated by the gray market culture of the country it supposedly knew best. Thank you so much for watching. Hey, I bet you're asking though, all this talk about the Zevo, what about the games? You're in luck. We have a punching weight where I go through chronologically every single game on the Zevo and give you a slightly different perspective on the history of this doomed machine. I want to give a huge shout out. This video was written by Cass from Bad Game Hall of Fame with some touches from Grace and myself. It was also edited by the Sober Dwarf, who, by the way, she was the one that found the Brood rap, so she's a damn legend. Check out her channel. We also need to shout out Cloth Map and Red Bull, who are both responsible for fantastic documentaries on Brazil's gaming culture. Links are below, so please check them out if you want to learn more about Brazil's incredible gaming scene. And lastly, shouts to Cyberwolf for the tip on Sega's announced but unreleased Zevo games. Also, thanks to all the people that support us on Patreon. All these names here, they are helping us out on Patreon. A lot of new names. Check out all these new people. Thank you so much for joining us. 2022 is going to be a hell of a year. We're so glad to have y'all. Also, thanks to our dog Dollop, who was sleeping here the whole time. And you know what? Take a drink, watch the video again, and take a drink every single time these stuffed animals shifted or fell, because this was a bad idea. We should have moved her, but she's so cute though. She's so comfy until she ruins the continuity. Anyway, I'm going to scratch my dog's face a little more, and I'll see you again really soon. Thanks for watching. Stay powerful. Good night, everybody.
Chad, I have something very special here. This is Mario Kart Wii Deluxe. This is the green edition. And this has over 700 new tracks from Mario Kart Wii from the community who you know makes all these levels. I'm honestly fucking blown away. Also, you get some pretty cool characters. Isabelle, Pikachu, Tails, Inkling Girl, Olimar, Mario. This just came out. Fox, Toon Link, Bomberman, King Dedede, King K. Rool, Banjo, Captain Falcon, Crash Bandicoot, Pac-Man, Link, Lucina, Rob, Son Goku, and Mario is here too for some reason.
It's my turn.
So you know I have to play as Goku.
I'm getting pumped.
So check out these levels. Yep. Those weren't, there have not been any repeats yet. There have not been repeats. Now I think we're finally onto the repeats. Maybe? No, not yet. let's start with Outset Island. There is a Twin Peaks level. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know what that's going to be like 100%, but... Just in case you didn't know, Zelda Wind Waker. I'm kind of surprised it's not Wind Waker music. Yeah, it's DKR, not Diddy Kong Racing. But yeah, this is like a 4 gig file of just tons of levels. There's custom music. It's very... There's different editions, so there's some versions that don't have music, some versions that don't have new characters. For the sake of time, chat, unless a course is like amazing, I'm only going to be playing a tiny bit of each one. Okay, so you have levels from Crash Team Racing, Diddy Kong Racing. You have a ton of levels from the classic Mario Kart games. I don't know if there's anyone that knows any recommendations. You could also just do random. Or really, Baby Park. There's 700 levels, and it fucking randomly chose Baby Park. I can't escape this fucking level. I like Baby Park. I think it's a great level, actually. Well, maybe not great. It's a level.
Here we go.
Focus, G.
Sorry.
I would have loved something like this, though, when I was younger. It's just like... The problem is, now that we have 700 plus levels in Mario Kart Wii, we have like 40,000 other games we could be playing. But when Mario Kart Wii first came out, that was like a year of my life. Not exclusively, but it was really easy to come back to this game every time people hung out. Every time I had a little bit of extra time to just play Mario Kart Wii. It was a big one. I didn't use tilt controls, though, Chad. I want to apologize. I'm not a real gamer. Really? I got motherfucked on Baby Park? What else is new? Oh, I have to do next race. Okay, I should do a save state.
I'm Goku.
I'm sorry, it has to be Goku.
Let's do this.
Check out Melting Magma Melee. If I can find it, I will try that level. Someone said they saw New York City. I think that's Mario Kart Tour. Yeah. Desktop dash. Desktop dash. Wait, there's Mario Kart World tracks in this?
Here we go.
Yes? How the fuck is it even possible? I'm just on a desk.
Let's go. Come on.
SW2 or Mario Kart World? This one's cool.
Sorry.
Guide to Catching Booze. There's even like fake history books and game cartridges on the desk.
Come on.
Press up on D-pad